The confusion in Margaret's eyes was heartbreaking. She sat in the front row of the Tonight Show studio, a frail 91-year-old woman with silver hair and hands that constantly fidgeted with her purse strap. Next to her, her daughter Carol held her arm gently, whispering reassurances that seemed to fade as quickly as they were spoken. That's okay, Mom. We're just watching his show. You like Jimmy, remember? We watch him every night at home. But Margaret didn't remember. Alzheimer's had stolen most of her memories over the past 3 years, leaving behind fragments of a life that once overflowed with love, laughter, and the kind of maternal wisdom that had shaped 3 children and 7 grandchildren. The woman sitting in that chair was a shadow of the Margaret Sullivan who had once commanded every room she entered. Carol remembered her mother as a force of nature, the woman who had organized church potlucks for hundreds, who had memorized every birthday and anniversary in their extended family, who could recite entire poems by heart, and often did while cooking Sunday dinner. Margaret had been a nurse for 42 years, working the overnight shift at St. Mary's Hospital so she could be home during the day for her children. She'd raised 3 kids largely on her own, while Robert worked double shifts at the factory, yet somehow made every school play, every basketball game, every parent-teacher conference. Her children never doubted for a moment that they were the center of her universe. Carol Thompson, 68, had been caring for her mother alone since the diagnosis. The woman who had raised her with such strength and grace now needed help with everything: eating, dressing, even recognizing her own reflection. Most days, Margaret looked at Carol like she was a kind stranger, polite but distant. The hardest part wasn't the physical care. Carol had inherited her mother's nurturing nature and didn't mind helping with meals and medications. The hardest part was watching her mother's personality fade away. The sharp wit that had kept their family laughing through difficult times was gone. The endless store of family stories and traditions was locked away behind a wall of confusion. Carol's own children, now adults with families of their own, had gently suggested nursing home placement. Mom, you're exhausting yourself. There are professionals who can help Grandma better than you can. But Carol couldn't bear the thought of her mother dying among strangers. Margaret had devoted her entire life to taking care of others, her patients, her family, her community. The Tonight Show tickets had been Carol's desperate attempt to create one final good memory. Margaret had always loved comedy shows, had laughed at Johnny Carson for decades, had seamlessly transitioned to loving Jimmy Fallon's gentle humor. Even as her memory failed, she still responded to music and laughter with fleeting smiles. Maybe something will spark, Carol had told herself while purchasing the tickets online at 2 a.m., exhausted from another sleepless night of caring for a mother who no longer knew her name. She'd read articles about how familiar environments and activities could sometimes trigger moments of clarity in Alzheimer's patients. They'd spent the afternoon preparing for the show. Carol had helped her mother into her best dress, navy blue with small pearl buttons, the one Margaret had worn to Carol's college graduation 30 years ago. She'd carefully applied her mother's lipstick, the same shade of rose pink Margaret had worn for decades, and fastened the pearl earrings that had been her father's gift on their 25th wedding anniversary. It was a Thursday night taping in late October. Jimmy was in excellent spirits, having just finished a successful musical sketch with guest star Hugh Jackman. The audience was energetic, the atmosphere warm and welcoming. Carol had chosen seats close to the stage, hoping the proximity might help her mother feel more engaged. During the first commercial break, Margaret had seemed agitated by the lights and noise. She kept asking where they were and why there were so many people. Carol patiently explained again and again that they were watching a television show, but each explanation seemed to disappear as soon as it was given. But as Jimmy moved into his usual audience interaction during the commercial break, his eyes landed on Margaret. Something about her vacant stare, the way she seemed to be looking through everything rather than at it, caught his attention. "Ma'am, are you enjoying the show tonight?" Jimmy called out warmly. Margaret looked toward his voice but seemed confused by the question. Carol quickly leaned in to help. "She's having a good time," Carol answered for her mother. "We watch you every night together." Jimmy noticed the way Carol protectively held her mother's arm, the tired lines around the younger woman's eyes, the gentle patience in her voice that spoke of months or years of similar interactions. He noticed how Margaret's fingers worked at her purse strap in a repetitive motion. how her eyes held the particular kind of confusion that suggested something beyond normal aging. His comedy instincts told him to move on to a more responsive audience member, someone who could provide the quick banter that energized the crowd. His human instincts told him something else entirely. Jimmy stepped down from the stage and approached their seats. As he got closer, he could see Margaret more clearly, the beautiful bone structure that spoke of a woman who had once been stunning, the pearl earrings that suggested decades of elegant occasions, the wedding ring she still wore after being widowed 15 years ago, the careful way Carol had dressed her mother for this special outing. "What's your mother's name?" Jimmy asked Carol softly. Margaret Sullivan. She's 91 and she has Alzheimer's. I'm sorry, she doesn't recognize people anymore. The words carried the weight of 1,000 difficult days, of watching someone you love slip away while their body remains. Jimmy had heard that tone before, in his own voice when talking about his father's illness, in friends describing their parents' decline. Jimmy knelt down in front of Margaret's seat, bringing himself to her eye level. "Hello, Margaret, I'm Jimmy." Margaret looked at him with polite confusion, the way she looked at everyone now, shopkeepers, neighbors, sometimes even her own reflection. "That's a nice name," she said carefully, as if testing each word. "Thank you. You have beautiful earrings." Margaret's hand instinctively went to her ear, a gesture so automatic it seemed to bypass the damaged pathways in her brain. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes, a shadow of the woman who used to spend an hour getting ready for church every Sunday, who never left the house without lipstick and proper jewelry. "My husband gave them to me," she said clearly, then looked surprised at her own words. Carol gasped softly. Her mother hadn't mentioned her father in over a year. Robert Sullivan had died 15 years ago, and for the first decade after his death, Margaret had spoken of him daily. But Alzheimer's had eventually stolen even those precious memories. Jimmy sensed something important happening. Instead of moving on to easier conversation, he stayed crouched beside Margaret's chair. "Tell me about your husband," he said gently. "Robert," Margaret said, and suddenly her voice was different, stronger, more present, touched with the warmth that Carol remembered from childhood. "He was so handsome in his Navy uniform. We danced at the Starlight Ballroom on our first date. The cameras, without being directed, began focusing on this unexpected moment. The audience around them fell quiet, sensing they were witnessing something profound. Even the production crews stopped their usual between takes preparations to watch. "Was he a good dancer?" Jimmy asked. Margaret smiled, the first real smile Carol had seen in months, the smile that had once lit up every family gathering. "Oh, wonderful. He could make any song sound like a waltz, even Elvis songs. He'd hold me close and spin me around our kitchen while the children did their homework at the table." Carol started crying, watching her mother remember things that had seemed lost forever. She could picture the scene perfectly, her parents dancing in their small kitchen while she and her brothers pretended to focus on math problems, rolling their eyes at their parents' romance, but secretly loving the security it represented. "Do you remember your children?" Jimmy asked carefully. Margaret looked confused again, the clarity fading like a radio signal drifting out of range. "Children? Yes, you have 3 beautiful children. This is one of them, right here." Jimmy gestured to Carol. Margaret looked at Carol blankly, studying her face as if trying to place a half-remembered acquaintance. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." Carol's heart broke a little more, but she was used to this particular pain by now. The moments of recognition had become increasingly rare over the past year, each one a precious gift that made the long stretches of absence even more difficult to bear. But Jimmy wasn't giving up. "Margaret, do you remember singing lullabies?" Something sparked again, a different memory pathway opening up. Music and rhythm often remained accessible longer than other memories in Alzheimer's patients. "Rock-a-bye baby in the treetop," Margaret began singing softly, her voice trembling but surprisingly true to pitch. "When the wind blows, the cradle will rock," Jimmy continued, and Margaret joined in more confidently, her voice growing stronger with each familiar word. As they sang together, something remarkable happened. Margaret's eyes began to focus more clearly, as if the melody was pulling her back from wherever the disease had taken her. She looked around the studio as if seeing it for the first time, taking in the lights, the cameras, the audience, watching them with rapt attention. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice clearer than it had been all evening. We're at a television show, Jimmy explained patiently. You're here with your daughter, Carol. Margaret looked at Carol again, this time really studying her face. Carol held her breath, hoping, praying for the miracle of recognition. Carol, Margaret whispered, and the word carried 50 years of love. Yes, Mom, it's me. My little girl. But you're all grown up. How did you get so old? Marguerite reached out and touched Carol's face with wonder, tracing the lines that time had etched there. Carol sobbed openly now, not caring that hundreds of people were watching her most private moment of joy. I'm 68, Mom, but I'm still your little girl. 68? But that would make me. Margaret looked confused again for a moment, then smiled with a flash of her old humor. Ancient. The audience was completely silent, understanding instinctively that they were witnessing something sacred, a mother and daughter finding each other across the void that disease had created between them. Jimmy made a decision that would stop the show entirely. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, standing up and addressing the crowd, we're witnessing something extraordinary here. This is Margaret, and she's showing us that love is stronger than any disease. Even when memory fails, love finds a way through. He turned back to Margaret, whose moment of clarity seemed to be holding longer than usual. Would you like to come up on stage with me? I think there's some people here who would love to meet you. Margaret looked uncertain, the way she often did when faced with new situations, but Carol encouraged her. It's okay, Mom. Jimmy's a friend. Together, Jimmy and Carol helped Margaret onto the stage. The studio lighting crew, without being asked, adjusted the lights to something softer, more gentle. The Roots stopped their casual playing entirely, creating a space of reverent quiet. Margaret, Jimmy said, you raised 3 children and 7 grandchildren. You were married to Robert for 54 years. You taught Sunday school for 30 years and worked as a nurse for 42 years. You have lived an extraordinary life. Margaret listened, nodding as if hearing about someone else's life, but then something shifted in her expression, recognition not of specific memories, but of the truth in what Jimmy was saying. 7 grandchildren, she asked. Yes. Would you like to hear about them? Carol joined them on stage and began describing each grandchild. With each name and story, Margaret seemed to remember a little more. She remembered teaching her granddaughter Sarah to bake chocolate chip cookies. She remembered her grandson Michael's graduation from college, how proud she'd been when he became the first in the family to earn a master's degree. They all love you very much, Carol said. Even when you don't remember us, we remember you. We remember every story you told us, every lesson you taught us, every hug you gave us. Margaret looked out at the audience, then back at Carol. The clarity in her eyes was remarkable, not complete, but more present than she'd been in months. I'm sick, aren't I? The question hung in the air. Carol had been dreading this moment of awareness when her mother would understand what was happening to her. Yes, Mom, but you're still you. You're still the woman who sang me to sleep every night, who kissed every scraped knee, who taught me to be strong and kind and to always help others. Margaret reached for Carol's hand with both of hers. I'm sorry I forgot you, sweetheart. You didn't forget me, Mom. You're right here with me now, and even when the sickness makes you confused, I know you love me. I can feel it. The audience erupted in spontaneous applause, but it was gentle, respectful recognition of something sacred happening on stage. Many people were openly crying, thinking of their own parents, their own fears of aging and loss. Jimmy had tears streaming down his face. Margaret, thank you for reminding us that love doesn't live in memory. It lives in the heart, and the heart remembers even when the mind cannot. Margaret looked at Jimmy with clear eyes. You're very kind. Your mother raised you well. I hope so, and Carol is raising her children the same way you raised her, with endless love and patience. As they helped Margaret back to her seat, she turned to Carol one more time. Promise me something? Anything, Mom. Don't be sad when I forget again. I may not remember tomorrow, but I feel how much you love me. That feeling stays even when the memories go. Love doesn't need memory to exist. The wisdom in those words silenced the entire studio. Here was a woman whose mind was failing, yet she was teaching everyone present about the true nature of love. The episode that aired became one of the most watched and shared segments in Tonight Show history. Medical experts called it a perfect example of how emotional connections can temporarily break through the fog of Alzheimer's. The video was used in nursing schools and caregiver training programs as an example of how to connect with dementia patients. Carol continued bringing her mother to familiar places, hoping for more moments like this. They didn't always work. Some days Margaret didn't recognize her at all, and some outings ended in confusion and tears. But when the moments of clarity came, they were precious gifts that sustained Carol through the darker time. Margaret's condition continued to decline over the following months, but she had more good days than expected. Carol wondered if that night at the Tonight Show had somehow strengthened her mother's connection to the present, given her something to hold on to. Margaret passed away peacefully 18 months later, surrounded by family. At her funeral, Carol played the video of her mother's moment of clarity on the Tonight Show. She was right, Carol told the gathered mourners. Love stays even when memory goes, and sometimes, if we're very lucky, love finds a way to shine through the darkness one more time. The Tonight Show now partners with the Alzheimer's Association to raise awareness about the disease and the families who face it. Jimmy often speaks about that night, saying it changed his understanding of what it means to truly see someone. And every year on World Alzheimer's Day, they dedicate a moment to remind viewers that behind every diagnosis is a person who was once someone's everything and still is, even when they can't remember it themselves. Because love doesn't need memory to exist. It needs only a heart that recognizes home, even in the darkness. And sometimes in the space between one heartbeat and the next, love finds a way to break through every barrier and remind us that we are never truly lost as long as someone remembers us with love.